Suriname is gastland van de 17th Regional Meeting of de ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly. De opening die heeft er vandaag plaats gehad en de opening die werd verricht door DNA-voorzitter Jennifer Gilling-Simons. Onderwerpen welke de komende dagen aan de orde zullen komen, dat zijn zaken als klimaatsverandering, Brexit, rijkdommen in de wereld en macht die slechts bij een kleine elitegroep is, terwijl grote delen in extreme armoede leven. Ook Suriname die haar bossen wil promoten bij deze ACP-EU-meeting. We voeren nu naar de beelden van de opening en de beelden zijn vastgelegd door Karen Sakto.
We are now at a critical time of the cooperation where of crafting the future agreement that is fit for purpose. The ACP has underpinned its mandate on Agenda 2030 and Sustainable Development Goals. At the 808th session of the ACP Council of Ministers, ministers took a decision to include regional protocols to address the regional specificity that were highlighted in the ACP negotiating mandates. It is therefore my strong belief that regional meetings will become increasingly an important medium through which we sensitize our national parliaments as well as the European Parliament on the development challenges of ACP states and regions and the important role of ACP-EU cooperation can play to meet the needs of those that put us in office. You will recall that parliamentary involvement in the work of the Cotonou Agreement is part of the democratic attribute of the agreement and has moved in tandem with the evolution of the nature and scope of ACP-EU institutions. The JPA embodies the democratic ideals of the parties to the Cotonou Agreement in that it brings together equal numbers of parliamentarians from national legislatures in ACP states and from the European Parliament of the EU to dialogue, exchange views, and propose solutions to the challenges of development that the ACP-EU partnership is engaged in resolving. It is the only institution of its kind. There is no other multilateral development body that includes within its treaty obligations the need to ensure the involvement of parliamentarians in such activities. As such, I'm pleased to inform that the Council of Ministers at their 808th session passed a resolution on a strong parliamentary dimension of the JPA, which called for the need for an interaction between the ACP Parliamentary Monitoring Group with the Central Negotiating Group. Efforts are underway to facilitate that interaction in the ongoing negotiations of a successor agreement. I therefore call for more involvement from you, dear colleagues of the Caribbean region, in the ongoing negotiation for the maintaining of the ACP Parliamentary Assembly. Failing to do this, all the major achievements earned during the last 40 years will be lost. Dear colleagues from the Caribbean region, I know your commitment, your hard-working spirit, and I know that together we will make it. As we deliberate on several agenda items on the agenda of the 17th regional meeting, I would like to echo once again what the ultimate objective of our collective efforts must be, namely, to lift ourselves from the margins and poverty onto the mainstream of international development, to create wealth and opportunities for its sustainable generation, and to establish and maintain political and economic institutions that will secure peace, security, and stability, as well as environmental protection for present and future generations in our states. Central to all this issue is the role of parliaments. In all the great debates that have accompanied these global issues in developing countries alike, there is an underlying current of moral, ethical, economic, and political questions about the proper role of government and its responsibility to protect the public interest. This is the area in which parliamentarians can bring to bear their legislative authority and political legitimacy. I am of the view that where governments and parliament are weak or ineffective, and policy devised or implemented is likely to be the same. If this premise is true for national level decision-making, I believe that it equally holds for international institutions as well. This leads me to say a few words on the importance of regional integration, an area that is unfortunately often outside the purview of national parliaments. Regional integration is the key to unlocking the developmental potential of our member states. For instance, there is still less trade between African countries compared with trade between Africa and the rest of the world. The same is true of Pacific and Caribbean regions. The same is true between the Caribbean regions, Pacific region, and African region. So this is a challenge that we are up to achieve. I think the same, I believe that regional integration must be the platform to foster the smooth and gradual integration of our regions into the rest of the global economy. However, regional integration is not just economic integration. Regional integration is a multidimensional process that is all-inclusive to promote sustainable development and indeed the alleviation of extreme poverty. This is why, dear colleagues, our role as parliamentarians in the regional integrations processes should become a priority. Madam Speaker, honorable members, the ACP Group supports many initiatives of peace and conflict resolution that are being undertaken at the level of continental and regional integration organizations, such as the CARIFORUM. I wish to place on record our appreciations for the efforts by the CARIFORUM to ensure there is a lasting solution to the situation in Haiti.
We do this because this can provide mutual benefit. But we have to realize that this is actually not natural, but an achievement. An achievement of the 20th century, after wars with great suffering devastated the world, and humanity became aware that dialogue and cooperation was the only road to peace and prosperity for all. Today, in the world we live in today, we experience that countries start to pull out of treaties of cooperation, of institutions and agreements that have to keep the world orderly and safe. This is of great concern, especially to small nations like ours. Today, we are also facing climate change that can bring suffering and in the longer term devastation to humans on a scale we probably cannot imagine. We have not been able to address this issue sufficiently up to this moment and need to convince high-emission, low-forestation countries to take their responsibility and reduce emissions while supporting the preservation and expansion of forests. This means that we have to address this issue. We need to put it on the table in every meeting and in every encounter we have in all the organizations we are part of. This makes us even more aware that working together and achieving cooperation for mutual benefit is not something we can take for granted. We have the obligation, we owe it to our peoples, to nourish the relationships we have, to establish new ones, to work with countries that face the same problems, and find solutions that will create real opportunities for the people, in our case, of the Caribbean. We are depending on the powerful nations in the world to keep the peace so that everyone, the whole world, the rich and the poor, developing nations and nations that have established a good economic situation for themselves, that we can exist and that we can develop in peace. We also depend on these powerful nations to change the paradigm of our political economical system that has brought us where we are today. A world in which about 100 people own as much as what half of the world population owns. A never-before-seen concentration of wealth and the power that goes with it. A world that, according to the IPCC, faces hardship in the short term, actually now we are already facing it, devastation, and in the longer term, even extinction if we cannot stop runaway climate change. As we stated as parliaments, in the IPU conference in Ecuador, it was in 2013, we need to move away from a system that promotes only relentless growth to a system that recognizes that human well-being is the primary goal and objective of all of our actions.